Hey, that's pretty bad. I gotta be honest with you guys. This one hurts. It hurt to watch this game. 19 offensive rebounds for the Nets. 6 to David Duke Jr., of course, who has not played a bunch this year, but came in at a sturdy 6'5", averaging like 2 boards a game. He gobbled up 13. The Brooklyn Nets defeat the Raptors 131-129 in overtime. I can't remember how many players they're missing because of COVID protocol. I'll list them off now. DeAndre Bembry, Bruce Brown, Harden, Harris, James Johnson, Millsap. I mean, Kyrie Irving still isn't vaccinated, so obviously him. And yeah, Kevin Durant and Patty Mills, I would say for the most part, led, and Kessler Edwards too. They led the onslaught against the Raptors, and then everybody else just kind of filled in and tried to play like this really rough and tumble brand of basketball. I mean, Blake Griffin was getting isolations on a cross match on Fred VanVleet and taking it all the way to the cup. He hit 2 threes in this game, and so here's a fun little piece of trivia for you. Prior to this game, Blake Griffin had missed 24 straight threes. His last three-pointer made was November 7th. Who did that come against? Correct, the Raptors, and he hit 2 more tonight. Pretty insane. And yeah, David Duke Jr., 6 offensive rebounds. So 6 extra possessions. Particularly meaningful when a guy like Kevin Durant or Patty Mills is lurking for offensive rebounding opportunities where they get to shoot the 3 after relocating. KD with 34 points, 13 rebounds, 11 assists. Patty Mills with 30 points, just gunning. And yeah, Kessler Edwards, he was 3-6 from downtown, had 4 offensive rebounds. Day'Ron Sharpe, he looked really good in the first half. He had 4 offensive rebounds. The Raptors just got bodied by Nick Claxton and, KD in this ragtag group of Nets. And KD deserves love because he's one of the greatest players of all time. But the Raptors should have been able to prepare schematically. You saw it towards the end of the game. David Duke Jr., the ball is sitting in his hands and he has to shoot it because the Raptors play him. So it's like, you got to shoot the 3. Move the ball from this point on. You're going to put him in a position where they might have a shot clock violation or something. He was 4-13. He went 0-3 from downtown. And they didn't really figure it out in this game. That was the most difficult part, was that they had the overzealous help on KD. They wanted the ball out of his hands, but they weren't recovering well. And too often the ball was funneling to dangerous shooters. And I would say actually to start the game in the first half more than anything, they're pressing up way too much, like respecting them as if they were shooters. And David Duke started this game, for the record, as did Nick Claxton, as did Blake Griffin. For the most part, even though Blake went 2-4, that's 3 absolute non-shooters. And they're pressing up on KD and bringing help so far out of the paint that KD was making simplistic little reads just to hand off to guys going downhill for layups and stuff like that. The Raptors' defense was abysmal. It was really, really bad. I mean, KD is a superpower, of course. You can house like a great offense under his giant wingspan, but these are some severely limited players next to him. And the fact that Nick Claxton was able to get 10 field goal attempts all at the rim, finish 8 of them, really speaks to like the Raptors, a mental sharpness that you need to have to follow a game plan and to make sure that a lot of these guys, they're being put in tough positions where they're not comfortable and they don't just get to do like, these gritty, helpful plays to help Kevin Durant and Patty Mills and Blake Griffin to some degree. Like, no, you have to put them in positions where they're making decisions, they're making reads against the moving defense. Not that they're just the beneficiaries of that from KD. That's the point. It's like they're not getting the ball out of KD's hands fast enough or with enough conviction. And then they're left to play scramble. It's like you have to double really hard and then expect guys like Scottie and Pascal to just recover on the back end. And then you show hard on the front side of that double, right? Like that's what you have to do if you're going to play that style. Or you could play more so straight up and just shade heavily to KD. That's fine. Ask guys to catch up. But this type of thing where KD was getting like 2 steps downhill, then they're showing all that attention. And then like it's way harder to catch up from that point because there's already a wide open shot available. And it's just like, and especially when they're stepping up, like Chris Boucher, this was, I would say, a pretty bad game for him. Like, pretty bad game from him. I'm pretty surprised he closed in this game. I thought they should have gone with Yuta Watanabe, but anyway, Chris stepping up when he very clearly, like, if he's not going to make KD miss from mid-range. Chris Boucher stepping up and, like, getting a hand in the vicinity doesn't matter. But it certainly matters for Nick Claxton, who's rolling to the rim unimpeded and now has, like, a completely open lane because Chris Boucher is stepping up there. That's not what you want to do. And so the Raptors just set out to be eviscerated by an offensively challenged team. And they did not put the tertiary guys in enough difficult positions. That's flat out, that's exactly what went wrong. Towards the end of the game, they managed to do it to David Duke Jr. They managed to do it to Blake a little bit. But when you let the team score 130, albeit with overtime, it's just, it's not tenable. It doesn't work. You can't actually expect to win a game when you're that sloppy on defense. And it extends even past that, right? Like the 19 offensive rebounds. You got it. I know they're cross-matching a lot. I know there's a lot of switching and a lot of catching up because of what KD put the positions KD puts you in, right? That makes sense to me, of course. But you have to do your due diligence to find a man and body up. Even towards the end of the game, David Duke Jr. hit those 2 free throws. Nobody boxed him out. I don't care if he's 6'5". That's his 6th offensive rebound of the game. That's like the nail in the coffin. You got to box out. And the Raptors, for whatever reason, continuously throughout this game, just weren't doing it. Scottie Barnes, like, I wish that they would have won this game because it would have been like, it still is, but it would have been a more celebratory feather in Scottie's cap because the 23, 12, and 5 that he had in this game, the 2 threes he made in the fourth quarter, one of them a step back, just nuts. Like he was running back on these transition plays for the Nets and blowing up transition opportunities despite starting like 10 feet behind the ball. That is so much work. That is so much hustle. And like great passing reads that we got. And he started out slower in this game because the Nets were really sitting on his little, they didn't want to let him turn the corner. And they've seen him turn the corner against other teams in the Raptors division, Boston, probably more than likely. And they said, we're going to shade really hard. We'll make him pass out. He made good reads all game. Some of them like a little bit banal, and the Raptors had to live with it. And that was a big struggle was the Scottie plus bench lineup because I think the bench finished 2 of 14 from downtown, just abysmal. Basically, they didn't get run after that stretch. It was really, except for Utah, obviously, because Utah he's the best player on the bench currently, and almost assuredly will be until OG comes back and pushes somebody else onto the. Well, even Utah is probably better than Boucher as a player, and so yeah, that's worth saying as well. But Utah's good, so I have no qualms about Utah. As I said, I wish he would have been able to close, even though he did go 1 for 6 in this game. 1 of 5 from downtown really hurts, but golly, the Cliff Notes. I don't know, man. The starters killed it the whole game, and then in overtime, offensive rebounds killed them, and they survived the offensive rebounding, even though they really shouldn't have. You know, during regulation, they played really clean basketball offensively. That 44-point third quarter was some beautiful stuff. Guys were finding spots. Guys were hitting shots. They were getting to their spots. They're drawing attention. They're making the right read, and they were hitting shots when it was advantageous. They did a fantastic job, and this game really fell apart at the seams, man. Because you got to be able to close out possessions more than anything. Like the fact that like Patty Mills is a proven shooter, absolutely. The 30 points is fantastic. But the differential of like guys like Patty Mills and Kessler Edwards combining for 47, right? And the Raptors bench combining for what? Like 15, 16? That just isn't going to cut it. That is the whole point of this, is that the Raptors starters, save for Boucher. So you have Gary, 42, Pascal, 44, Barnes, 44, Fred, 47. All those guys play heavy minutes, and all of them Big pluses as far as plus minus goes, except for Scottie, and Scottie was only because he was saddled with that bench lineup. Fred gives you 31 and 9. Scottie gives you 23, 12 and 5. Pascal 25, 6 and 2, almost 60% shooting from the floor. Gary Trent 25, 2, 5 and 3. 6 of 12 from downtown. Really made it happen as a spot up shooter. Once again, we're not worried about him getting downhill and making those little mid-range jumpers. That wasn't even really a facet of his game tonight. He was moving off ball. He got downhill for it. He got a steal and a dunk, and he had a great give and go play with Fred late in the game where he got a layup out of it. But that was off the pass. Like nothing, there was no part of Gary Trent's game tonight that was the mid-range king stuff that he's known for currently. This was the real meat of his game. Like that mid-range stuff can come and go, the effectiveness of it for sure. But Gary Trent, like the 3 steals, hitting from downtown, spacing the floor, and just some really slick connective passing, which is a very, very new development for him. And he's had a couple games of it in a row. That is what makes Gary Trent Jr. his most positive, his most valuable. It isn't like this off the dribble stuff in the mid range. Who cares about that? But Gary Trent was hitting his open threes and hit a couple off the dribble too. That's all anybody could ask for. He was great tonight. And that's what I mean. It's like those 4 guys were awesome. Did Fred like put up shots at the end of the game that maybe he shouldn't have? Was Nick Nurse likely telling Fred to take it himself because he didn't want to turn the ball over and he didn't want to run an action and do all that kind of stuff? Like they run those dribble handoff weaves up top. How scared are they if they start running something like that, that one of the nets is going to jump a handoff and get out on the break for a layup or something like that, right? So they want to keep it simple. And so they do that. And it obviously doesn't work. I don't really like Fred VanVleet as an isolation option late in the game. I don't think that's his strength. I actually, quite frankly, it is not his strength. I'm still a proponent of giving the ball to Pascal, and he'll probably find a look, and you live with it. Some people would probably want Gary Trent or Scottie, whatever it is, and some people would want Fred. But like that's the point to me, is that it doesn't matter who took the final shot, because they had this game so much in the bag if they just play better. And that's what I mean is like teams steal games all the time. Like Luka Doncic has stolen many games for the Mavericks, of course, but the Mavericks aren't going to be a good team until they are a team that doesn't need Luka to just steal games for them all the time. And the Raptors needed somebody to snatch this game out for them, when in reality they're playing Kevin Durant and a bunch of guys who do legitimately spend a lot of time in the G League. All the love to the G League, but that just isn't really something you can do. As good as KD is, the Raptors should have had this wrapped up tighter than like a vacuum sealed package. This game was, from a defensive standpoint, a bit of a travesty as far as the game plan and the execution of it. And in the starting lineup, who was the biggest perpetrator? Without a doubt, it was Chris. And I don't mean to rag on Chris too much, because I think very favorably covered him this year, especially relative to other outlets. But this game, defensively, he really was lost. Like, was not cycling rotations properly, would switch out on somebody, and then he'd just sit in the paint and forget about them. Most notably, Patty Mills towards the end of the game, the guy who hit 7 threes in this game. Chris switched onto him in a pick and roll coverage and then just stood in the paint as Patty filtered out and relocated for a 3. You cannot do that. You have to track these guys. You have to make sure, at the very least, if you're not sticking them or hanging out, you have to make sure somebody's scramming or communicate or make sure something else is going on. Golly, man. Like, and there's so many other plays like that in this game where Chris was just an astronaut. He had no idea where to be defensively. He was floating, and not with purpose. He wasn't hovering. He wasn't being a menace to passing lanes or anything like that. No, the guy was just floating out there and floating out of driving lanes, out of passing lanes, that it would have been very good had he occupied them. And man, yeah, and the scheme, I didn't like it at all. Of course, KD is a guy who he can kind of bust a scheme at any point in time, but the Raptors, I mean, he shot 12 of 29. The Raptors did their thing for the most part as far as, contesting his shots. The biggest problem was what they allowed him to pass out into in the first half. Certainly the layups the layups he was able to create for others. And then in the second half, a lot of the attention going to like the 3 pointers. I mean, his last two, sorry, I think his last three assists actually were on 3 pointers, two to Kessler Edwards, one to Patty Mills. And that's just loading up and not keeping track of shooters. And that's how you lose games like this, especially when there's only like two guys that can shoot the ball on the floor. Like Cam Thomas was 2 of 10, 2 of 10, and he was abysmal this game. He was so bad. He had 3 turnovers. Every time he touched the ball, it was like hell for the Nets. Day'Ron Sharpe had a really good first half, but he was not a factor in the second half whatsoever. So you're looking at like Griffin, Duke Jr., Edwards, and Edwards. I know a lot of great draft analysts that I like a lot. Really like Edwards, so all the love to him for that. And like, obviously, they're seeing something good, and he played awesome this game. But that just can't run, especially when the Raptors on the other side, like Champagny had a nice little bump off the start of the game, like just being kind of a garbage man and getting putbacks and hanging around the dunker spot. But he still went 0 for 4 from downtown. And some of that was just the ball getting shoveled to him at the end of the clock. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't like that at all. Svi, 2 points, 1 of 4. Flynn, 1 of 4. Watanabe, 1 of 6. It's just, you cannot survive. Like, the Raptors have far and away the worst bench in the NBA. It's not close. They score the least. They shoot the worst from downtown, which also is really bad too, right? Because like if you're trying to saddle any of the main guys with the bench, like Scottie, Pascal, or Fred VanVleet, and you say, okay, we need you to lift the bench. You have to create shots for these guys. The Scottie, Fred, and Pascal, for the most part, create 3-point opportunities for their teammates. Those are the types of shots they create. I mean, the one shot that Utah missed, like Scottie was in the post, drew a double from Kevin Durant, threw it back out to Utah. He was wide open. It was the last shot he missed of the game, and he just clanked that right off the rim. Not good. And it's like, if Scottie and Pascal in particular are going to come stir it up inside and Fred is going to get downhill a little bit, they're going to create these wide open 3-point shots. The Raptors bench is the worst shooting bench from downtown in the NBA. Terrible fit. And that's why like Gary Trent Jr. can look like a savior sometimes, because it's like, oh, water in the desert. This guy can actually shoot a jumper. Thank goodness. And it's a lot to ask of these players to carry the load that they did, because that core four in this game, good Lord, did they carry, man. And yeah, so what a failure from a defensive standpoint. Didn't box out, didn't have I don't know if it's preparedness. I don't know if Nick Nurse was like, well, damn, this scheme is getting cooked. What do we do? I don't know if it's just players being spacey and not doing anything the proper way. I'm not sure, but there are just way too many mistakes in this game. Should Pascal have been like, they ran those horns actions at the end of the game where Pascal would get the ball and he's supposed to filter through his progressions. And, the Raptors, to Pascal's credit, they weren't able to open up any type of advantage. And he was just sitting there lame duck with the ball in his hand. He tried to create. He took a mid-range shot. He missed. That happened twice. They ran that same horns out stuff. I mean, he hit some of those earlier in the game, so you understand why he wants to bail out the offense, hit like a mid-range jumper, kind of get them out of a funk. I understand it. I see it. But it also would make a lot of sense if he just filter into that dribble handoff, which he did quite a few times. But late in the game, the ball got stuck and he was taking shots. That wasn't great decision making. The 0 of 4 from downtown from Pascal in this game, it really does hurt, because you could see on some of these half-court possessions, the ball filtered to him. And like, that's the breaking point of the possession. The Nets, they worked really hard to keep the ball from getting to a dangerous position. It's there now. Dangerous in Pascal's hands, open for three. He has to make them pay. He's like 33, 34% this year. You got to make one. And he didn't make any. I mean, but outside of that, like, his offensive game in this one, really sharp, especially in the first like 3 quarters. That he was awesome in that third quarter too. It's just finding opportunities for himself, working off other guys, and even in isolation, even in those quick little duck-ins, finding room in a very contested paint. He did an awesome job, and he still finished out with like a really clean stat line. It's just, in overtime in the fourth quarter. Would have liked a little bit more punch. By the way, I don't think this is a referendum on Pascal's game. I know people are very eager for those, but that's not coming from me. Uh, he's been really sharp since he's returned from the injury, and he appears to be gathering steam, playing good basketball, and yeah. Fred and Scottie, I mean, there's a lot of offensive production there, and they did their darndest, man. Scottie in particular helping out, like cleaning up that defensive glass. As I talked about earlier, blowing up transition opportunities, two step back threes, and did it all like he wasn't doing much at the start of the game. Like he was just being kind of a connective passer, making good reads, although not like super potent ones, but that's okay. Like you have to wait until, unless you're like Michael Jordan or LeBron James or like Kevin Durant, right? You can't just bend the will of the game to what you want. A lot of players don't have that type of skill set. And so Scottie, he waits for the ebbs and flows of the game for when he can dominate. And he found enough of those pockets in this game. And then by the end of it, he bent it to his will with those 2 threes. Stuck them right in these guys' grills. And the passing was just like a big plus too. I just think he was awesome tonight. And yes, Fred, as I talked about, I don't like the ISO, but I don't think that's the reason they lost this game. Could he have stolen the game for him? Could he have hit that shot and then they walk out of Barclays Center with a win? Yeah, but that's one possession. And even if you extrapolate it to like 3 or 4 different possessions late that you may not have liked from Fred, I don't know, man. The Raptors, they punted so many other possessions during this game, defensively, offensively, whatever, that like saying the guy 31-9 and saying like this guy, he's the reason we lost. I don't agree with it. If you're wondering like who's saying this, it's a common sentiment I've seen on Twitter. And if you're saying, why do you read Twitter? And I'll have to say, well, the medium of sports writing dictates that you try and create as large a platform for yourself so that you can gain meaningful and lucrative employment. And a large Twitter platform certainly helps grease the wheels for entrance into the industry and or important jobs within it. So yeah, that's why I'm on Twitter anyway. Oh, good Lord. Reggie Evans Award, Scottie Barnes. Couldn't go to anybody else. Incredible game. He strung a few together. The defense is coming around in a meaningful way, man. He looks like miles better. Way, way better than he did, even like 6 games ago. It's just like a rapid ascension. Boom, he's there. He went from being, like the worst defender in the starting lineup, like really, really the worst defender in the starting lineup by some measure. He was floating off ball. He didn't know what to do. A lot of his X outs are being like crossed up and confused and all that kind of stuff. And he's not filtering through rotations properly. And then guess what? He's there all of the sudden, and not just like there, but just like an incredibly affecting defender. Man. Anyway, top quick reaction comment is from Rambo. It's a tweet from Kevin Durant. Okay. Kevin Durant quotes a tweet from Skip Bayless where Skip Bayless said, "The best player on the planet was at it again tonight, Brooklyn. Going assassin in overtime for the COVID Rock Nets. Nothing like Kevin Durant. You watch, Braun? Question mark." And then Kevin Durant quote tweeted that and said, "I really don't like you." Yeah. Hell yeah, Kevin Durant. By the way, the way Skip Bayless framed this is the way that some of you people in the quick reaction, this is the way some of you in the comment section behave. You always have to frame it in this really negative way. It's like there's never success without it being at somebody else. Like, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't this happen? Da 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 da. And Kevin Durant is like, even though you said I was, the best player on the planet, I don't like you because this way of thinking is stupid. It's so needlessly combative. It's so needlessly negative. It's just there to stir up controversy. It's just there to be like the loudest dude in the room, trying to be as annoying as possible. Just trying to say, well, Kevin Durant did something good, so now this is a referendum on LeBron. Some of you guys have been doing that with Scottie, Pascal, Fred, whoever, for whatever reason. They're teammates, you goobers. And Kevin Durant recognizes that, like, Oh, yeah, I'm not even teammates with LeBron, but this is a regressive dialogue. Why don't I just shut this down and tell Skip Bayless I don't like him? And guess what? I don't like Skip Bayless either. So, hell yeah, KD, do your thing. Super fun game for him tonight. The Raptors, although the Raptors could have played a better defensive game plan and certainly shouldn't have given up so many offensive rebounds that give KD and Patty Mills in particular the chance to reload and to fire away. Good Lord. What a game. Raptors lose in overtime. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, whether you got into it in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day and goodbye.